feel satisfied. I don't feel like I've ever embarrassed myself or my people, you know, in nothing that I've done. And yet and all, I got the whole world fearing me, you know what I'm saying? At 23, weighing 160 pounds, you know what I'm saying? And I ain't even started. I haven't even rolled my plan out yet, and they scared. I got the vice president know who I am, the president, every cop and every...
Too, he was talking a lot of too. He was talking a whole lot of and sometimes like they gonna get at you when you talking. They gonna get at you, bro. You feel me? And as far as the situation, I know, you know, it supposed to be some between him and Haitian Jack and some jury or some like that or whatever it was, you know. And Biggie was telling, bro, you don't even with that.
He said it was, according to him now, according to him, he said it was security that accepted money, participated in it, and it was so-called homies.
When you get to be the age that we at and you get to become as successful as we are, you have to start doing some things that matter for the future.
And I'm saying everywhere we was going, we had to, you know, keep our eyes open, 10 toes on the...
Chaotic. It's hard to actually figure out what's what, but it's becoming clearer. It's becoming clearer and clearer. But I feel mad still that my brother, first of all.
What if one of the biggest tragedies in hip-hop history never actually happened? That question has been haunting fans, detectives, and even reporters for nearly 30 years. Because when you take a closer look at what went down in Las Vegas that night in September 1996, the cracks in the story aren't just small, they're massive. We're told Tupac Shakur was taken out in a drive-by, rushed to the hospital, and declared gone 6 days later. But from the second those bright Vegas lights came back on, the details started falling apart. No arrests, no real suspects, nothing. Even when a man connected to the gunman came forward, the case went nowhere. Not one person faced trial. Then there's the so-called cremation, allegedly done just 24 hours after the announcement. It happened so quickly that even close friends didn't get to see his body. On top of that, evidence started disappearing like magic. The coroner's photos never released, hospital files missing, and the crematory worker who handled the ashes. He retired the very next day and vanished for good. It's the kind of situation that sounds impossible for an ordinary person, yet somehow it slid right past everyone in one of the most publicized cases in music history. They want us to believe the investigation hit a dead end because nobody was talking, but insiders whisper it was something else. Something planned way before the first shot was ever fired. That wild possibility came roaring back to life in 2018. A man named Michael Nice, a former bodyguard with real credentials, not just another internet theorist, stepped out of the shadows with a story that shook everything. This wasn't some random guy chasing clout. Nice had ties to political movements and high-level security operations, even working with people linked to the Black Panthers, the same movement that shaped Tupac's parents. According to him, when word hit that a hit had been ordered on the rapper, a secret mission was launched, an operation to get Shakur out of the US before it was too late. Nice claimed he was part of that team, describing what sounded like something straight out of a spy movie. He said Tupac was quietly flown out of Nevada on a private jet headed to Barbados, disguised as a medical evacuation. But here's where things get wild. Nice said the body left behind wasn't Tupac's at all. It was a substitute arranged by a hospital insider. And the most explosive twist? Nice claimed the whole plan was personally approved by Fidel Castro himself.
Humans are not just good and bad, black and white. They're compassionate at times. They're at times. A man can be and compassionate to women at the same time. I was. Look at the lunatic and look at Brenda's got a baby.
According to him, Castro agreed to hide Tupac in Cuba under 3 strict conditions: no public appearances, no public statements, and total silence about the deal. Nice even swore he had the receipts, audio and video proof, including recordings of Castro confirming everything. But before he could release it to the world, the unthinkable happened. In December 2018, Michael Nice was found lifeless. And for those who believed his story, that only made it sound even more real. That wasn't some random tragedy, it was a message, a warning to anyone daring to dig too deep. Michael Nice's sudden death felt like the first domino in a long chain designed to keep a powerful secret buried for good. He had just gone public saying he risked everything because nobody's been arrested, because Shakur's not gone. And just days later, he was gone too. Officials said there was no foul play, but for those who followed the story, it looked way too familiar. Every person who claimed to hold the truth seemed to vanish before their evidence could ever surface. It became a pattern. Whistleblowers silenced, files lost, and questions left hanging in the air. Even without Nice's testimony, the so-called official version of events keeps crumbling under its own weight. Authorities said Tupac was hit 4 times by .40 caliber rounds at close range, but hospital eyewitness accounts never lined up. Some said he was awake and talking hours after the shooting. Others claimed he was rushed away before police even confirmed his identity. If his injuries were really fatal, how could there have been reports of movement, transfers, and even possible transport out of the country within hours? Something doesn't add up. And then comes the most suspicious detail of all, the cremation. Allegedly done right away for a mind-blowing $3 million in cash. That's not a cremation fee. That's hush money. No standard procedure costs anywhere near that. It sounds less like a farewell and more like a cover-up. And as the years passed, the people orbiting the case, especially Suge Knight, who was behind the wheel that night, have kept that mystery alive through endless trials, interviews, and cryptic comments that only deepen the shadows around Tupac's disappearance. Always teasing, never confirming.
And as soon as I walked out of there, I went in the bathroom and I threw up. And just laid on the floor for like 30 minutes. His mama came in there and cleaned me up.
Back in 2014, Suge Knight flat out told a reporter, "Shakur's not gone. He's somewhere smoking a Cuban cigar." For years, people brushed that off as just Suge being dramatic. But things took a turn when, from behind prison walls, Knight launched his podcast Collect Call, and the tone changed fast. In an early 2025 episode, Suge shifted his focus straight onto Snoop Dogg, his former artist and now the public face of Death Row Records. Suge didn't hold back. He said Snoop's got a lot of explaining to do about what really went down in Las Vegas. The way he said it made it sound like the version the world knows isn't the real one. That comment exploded across hip-hop circles like a grenade, especially because just 3 years earlier in 2022, Snoop had quietly bought the Death Row brand in a secretive deal that's still wrapped in mystery. Nobody knows who put up the money, how much was really paid, or which assets were actually sold. The timing of Suge's accusation, right after that sale, has people in the industry whispering that maybe the purchase wasn't just about music. Maybe it bought something much bigger. Some insiders believe that deal didn't just secure the Death Row legacy, it secured silence. And that changes everything. The rivalry between Suge and Snoop has always been iconic. But now it's starting to look less like beef and more like a war over control. Control of the story, the power, and the truth behind Tupac Shakur's disappearance. Suge Knight's prison podcast isn't just talk. It's full of sharp shots aimed straight at Snoop. He's been questioning whether Snoop's takeover of Death Row is really about honoring the label's legacy or rewriting its entire history. In one episode, Knight dropped a bombshell hinting that certain people inside the label actually knew what went down that night in Vegas, and that some of them have been cashing in on staying silent. And just like that, the old whispers came crawling back. Former Outlaws members started accusing Snoop of secretly undermining Tupac's legacy while pretending to celebrate it. Even filmmaker Alan Hughes, who directed a documentary on the Shakur family, once said Snoop dimmed his light to let Shakur shine, a strange comment that fans now see as something deeper, maybe even literal, because think about it. If Tupac really did survive and go underground, someone had to cover that up. Someone had to manage his empire, control the label, and handle the millions left behind. And when you stack the timeline together, the rushed cremation, the missing records, the insider's confession, and now Suge's new accusations, it starts looking way less like coincidence and way more like coordination. Every time a lead pops up, it's shut down just as fast. files vanish, sources disappear, and new headlines bury the story before anyone can dig deeper. But the scariest part of all doesn't trace back to 1996 or even 2018. It's from just last year. In 2023, a private investigator named Jimmy Poole made an announcement that sent the internet into chaos. He claimed to have found photographic proof that Tupac Shakur was alive and living quietly in Belize. Jimmy Poole's discovery shook the internet to its core. He uploaded 2 crystal-clear images of a man in his 40s who looked exactly like Tupac Shakur. Same eyes, same jawline, same energy, standing next to a local fan outside a small beachfront cafe in Belize. It looked too real to ignore, but within just 48 hours, everything vanished. The photos were wiped clean, Poole's channel disappeared, and friends started saying they couldn't reach him at all. No police report, no statement, nothing, just silence. And that's where the story stops being rumor and starts feeling dangerous. Because if Poole's evidence was real, then Michael Nice wasn't alone. It means Shakur really did make it out, and that the network that helped him escape didn't fade away after the 90s. It got stronger. It evolved into something bigger, smarter, and far more secretive.
Why you get these type of individuals always kicking dirt on Pac's name after they made their millions from doing these documentaries.
The same people who pulled off that legendary disappearance might still be out there, still watching, still protecting the truth, and still making sure that anyone who dares to expose it vanishes before they can speak. Every layer of this mystery keeps leading to the same chilling pattern. Anyone who digs too deep either disappears or is forced into silence. The more you look, the less it seems like a tragic ending, and the more it looks like a masterfully planned exit. Jimmy Poole's 2023 revelation proved he wasn't some random internet sleuth chasing clout. He was a licensed private investigator. He went on record claiming he had photographic proof that Tupac was alive and well in Belize. Those images showed a man in his 40s with the same sharp stare, the same scar on his jawline, standing confidently under the midday sun beside a smiling fan. Poole even captioned the post with a promise: more to come. But 2 days later, everything was gone. His page went dark, his trail went cold, and the silence around him said more than any words ever could. Every lead around Jimmy Poole's story collapsed overnight. Emails started bouncing back, calls went straight to voicemail, and anyone who tried reaching him said his number had been disconnected. Just like Michael Nice before him, Poole simply vanished, right when the story was about to blow wide open. The timing was way too perfect to be random. The parallels between the two men are chilling. One was a security insider, the other an investigator, and both claimed they could prove Tupac Shakur survived. Both promised evidence involving secret flights, body swaps, and even connections to Cuba. And both went silent right before they could release their files. When you lay their timelines side by side, the pattern looks too precise to be coincidence. It feels like someone's been wiping the trail clean every time it gets too close to the truth. Even Poole's final post hinted that he knew something was coming. He wrote cryptically that he might go offline for safety reasons. And after that, nothing. No interviews, no statements, no trace. It's like he disappeared into thin air. Then there's that infamous money trail, the alleged $3 million cash payment for the cremation. Who drops that kind of money for a standard procedure? That figure has never been confirmed in official records, but insiders close to the mortuary swore the payment was handled privately. Off the books, no paperwork, no receipts. And the man who supposedly carried it out, the crematory worker, retired immediately afterward, moved out of state, and erased himself from every directory. No interviews, no goodbyes, no trace of his career ever again. It's almost as if he was paid to disappear, just like the body he supposedly burned. Meanwhile, the justice system put on what looked like closure, but deep down it felt more like theater. A performance to make the world believe the case was solved, while the real truth stayed buried in smoke and silence. In 2023, prosecutors finally charged former gang member Dwayne "Keffy" D. Davis with Tupac's shooting. But even that so-called breakthrough felt staged. They didn't push for the harshest sentence, didn't demand a full public trial, and carefully avoided anything that could drag new names into the spotlight. It was like a controlled explosion, loud enough to grab headlines, but quiet enough to keep the real machinery hidden underneath. And then there's Suge Knight, the only surviving witness from inside that BMW. Even from prison, he refused to testify. When asked why, he told reporters that Keffy D was a childhood friend and that he wouldn't wish prison on my worst enemy.
We had to stay heated and make sure that we protected ourselves, you know what I'm saying?
That doesn't sound like loyalty. It sounds like protection. A man once feared across hip-hop, now shielding the one person accused of taking out his biggest artist? That says a lot more than his words ever could. So the question becomes, why? Maybe the truth isn't in what happened after that night in Vegas, but in what was already boiling before it. Those last months of Tupac's life were pure chaos, emotionally, mentally, and politically. He wasn't just clashing with East Coast rivals. He was fighting a war inside Death Row Records itself. By early 1996, the label that once promised him freedom had turned into a golden cage. The money, the power, the fame, it all came with strings attached. Tupac was starting to see through the shine, the strange late-night calls, the missing royalties, the constant sense he was being watched. Friends later said he became restless, on edge, even paranoid. Convinced that the people closest to him weren't protecting him anymore, they were playing both sides, and that's the moment when everything started to spiral. The point where fame, fear, and betrayal collided, and maybe, just maybe, where the real plan to make Tupac Shakur disappear began. From the outside, it looked like pure creative brilliance, a superstar at his peak. But behind the scenes, Tupac Shakur was unraveling. He'd become convinced that the very people he trusted were plotting against him. That paranoia wasn't coming from nowhere. It was building up inside Death Row's walls like a ticking bomb. The tension between Tupac and Snoop Dogg was the first visible crack in that shiny illusion. Just weeks before the Vegas shooting, the two were locked in a silent but deadly Cold War. Tupac felt straight up betrayed after hearing Snoop's radio interviews praising Biggie and Diddy, the same men he believed were behind attempts on his life. Inside Death Row, that kind of talk wasn't just disloyalty, it was treason. In a world where alliances could mean life or death, Snoop's sudden distance spoke volumes. Insiders say he started meeting with outside lawyers, setting up new business deals on his own. And to Tupac, that was confirmation of his worst fear. The brotherhood Suge Knight built was falling apart. Everyone was scrambling for their own insurance policy. But what was happening behind closed doors was even darker. Studio engineers and staff described chaotic recording sessions, shouting matches, slammed doors, and shattered equipment. Tupac accused Suge Knight of skimming his money, saying the numbers didn't add up. His music was raking in millions, yet he was seeing almost nothing in return. And the people handling his finances? The same men rumored to have ties to organized crime. When Tupac confronted them, he didn't hold back, throwing chairs, cursing the label, and promising to walk away as soon as his contract ended. For him, the music was supposed to be his escape route, but instead, the studio walls started to feel like a trap. Every verse he wrote was another warning, another coded message that his world was closing in fast. By that point, Tupac had already made up his mind. He wanted out. He told his friends he was planning to start his own label, take his master recordings, and go fully independent. If he'd pulled it off, it would have blown the lid off everything. The secret investors, the missing money, and the powerful names hiding behind Death Row's shadowy cash flow. And that's when things started to get dangerous. One summer night, witnesses claimed there was a violent argument inside a West Hollywood studio. They said Tupac lost it, yelling that they were bleeding him dry. It wasn't just anger, it was open rebellion. That moment sent shockwaves through the label's inner circle. Executives started panicking, whispering about how to contain him before he went public with what he knew. Because if Tupac started talking, the entire empire could come crashing down. In the weeks that followed, the vibe around Death Row turned icy cold. Bodyguards were switched out with no warning, meetings got canceled, and Tupac's personal phone line, his only connection to family and friends, was suddenly being monitored. Everything felt staged, like a setup waiting to happen. Looking back, the Las Vegas shooting doesn't feel random anymore. It feels calculated. The final move in a power struggle that had been brewing for months. By then, Tupac wasn't seen as the golden ticket. He was seen as a liability. a man who knew too much. He wasn't just an artist anymore. He was a threat to people who couldn't afford for the truth to come out. And if the whispers are real, his so-called death wasn't only a clever escape from enemies on the streets. It was survival from the people within his own camp. Maybe Tupac didn't fake his demise to hide from the world. Maybe he disappeared to protect himself from the empire he helped build. Maybe Tupac didn't disappear to escape fame. Maybe he vanished to get away from the very men who once called him brother. Men who, behind closed doors, had already decided he was worth more gone than alive. That's where everything starts to blur. The thin line between loyalty, silence, and profit. When Snoop Dogg bought Death Row Records in 2022, the media called it a full circle moment, a rap legend reclaiming his throne. But behind those glossy headlines, something didn't sit right. The price? Never revealed. The investors? Hidden. Even the assets included in the deal? Completely undisclosed. And here's the real kicker. The music catalog, the crown jewel of the label, wasn't even part of the initial purchase. Industry insiders started whispering that maybe someone else helped fund that buyout. Someone with a reason to keep the truth buried deep in Death Row's vaults. Then, 3 years later, came Suge Knight's 2025 outburst from his prison podcast. He didn't hold back, calling Snoop out directly, demanding, "What did you buy? Show me the paperwork." To most listeners, it sounded like old-school ego, just Suge stirring up trouble again. But to anyone following the Tupac mystery, it sounded like something much darker. What if Suge wasn't talking about branding rights at all? What if he was hinting that the deal was about erasing or rewriting history, cleaning up records that could expose what really went down? Because locked inside Death Row's archives were contracts, unreleased tapes, and confidential letters, documents that could reveal who controlled Tupac's final sessions and how money mysteriously moved after his supposed death. If those files were sealed or secretly transferred as part of that deal, then maybe the 2022 purchase wasn't about celebrating a legacy, it was about protecting one. Keeping the story under wraps, making sure no one ever uncovers what really happened to Tupac Shakur. The story was never meant to end. It was designed to be controlled forever. Even Snoop Dogg's own words now carry a strange, almost haunting echo. Years ago, he admitted that during Death Row's peak, he dimmed his light so Shakur could shine. Back then, it sounded humble, a respectful nod to a fallen friend. But if Tupac's exit was actually engineered to clear space for the next star, that statement suddenly feels chilling. Did Snoop really dim his own light? Or was someone else's light switched off so his could rise? That question has haunted hip-hop for years. Former Outlaws member Napoleon once said that Snoop had grown jealous of Tupac's dominance at the label, and director Alan Hughes repeated the same eerie phrasing, "Snoop dimmed his light," as if everyone involved was reading from the same coded script. When you start connecting these threads, the missing witnesses, the vanishing investigators, the unexplained $3 million payment, the legal cases that never reach a real conclusion, and the secret business deals signed behind closed doors, it paints a picture that's darker than any rumor online. This doesn't look like a coincidence. It looks like a coordinated disappearance, protected by men who built their fortunes off Tupac's name. Every decade brings a new distraction, a new confession, a new arrest, but somehow never the truth. Every person who gets close either backs off or disappears completely. The silence is too neat, too consistent, too calculated. Tupac's so-called death wasn't just a tragedy, it was an operation. One that took money, power, and precision. It required payoffs, fake paperwork, and people willing to vanish into the shadows. From the mysterious cremation to the sealed Death Row archives, every clue points to something far bigger than one night in Las Vegas. So maybe the real question was never if Tupac faked his death, but who helped him pull it off? Who stood to gain the most? And who's still working behind the scenes to make sure the truth about Tupac Shakur stays buried forever? And if people this powerful are still guarding a secret after almost 30 years, what else could they be hiding? Maybe the real story of Tupac Shakur isn't finished at all. It's just waiting for the next person bold enough to uncover it. Until then, the questions don't stop, and neither do we. So what do you think really happened that night in Vegas? Was it an ambush, an inside job, or a planned escape that changed music history forever? Drop your theories in the comments below. I want to hear every wild detail. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives like this one. Stay curious, stay alert, and I'll catch you in the next video.